Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump pardoning Texas Democrat Henry Cuellar and his wife Imelda, and the president slated to announce new fuel economy standards alongside top executives from Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. More fallout following the shooting of National Guard members in Washington, D.C. The Trump administration pausing immigration and asylum applications from 19 countries. Federal agents launch a major immigration crackdown in New Orleans, targeting suspects once arrested for violent crimes. The pandemic-era enhanced subsidies for the Affordable Care Act are expiring soon. Will lawmakers arrive at a plan before the subsidies expire? President Trump suggested that Americans may not have income tax to pay in the future due to tariffs, which would require trillions in tariff revenue. What will be the impact of this on trade and the economy? Republican Matt Van Epps wins Tennessee's special House election. Meanwhile, Democrat Myra Marcias launches an independent campaign for a congressional seat in Chicago.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. President Trump pardoning Texas Representative Henry Cuellar and his wife Imelda. Cuellar was indicted last year on more than a dozen federal charges, and the president expected to make an announcement today from the Oval Office about new fuel economy standards. We now go live to our Washington correspondent Mari Otsu at the North Lawn of the White House. Mari, good afternoon.
Don, good afternoon. Yes, President Trump today is pardoning Texas Democratic Representative Henry Cuellar and his wife Imelda. Cuellar was an outspoken critic of former President Joe Biden's border policies before the couple was indicted back in May 2024 for allegedly accepting nearly $600,000 in bribes in exchange for influencing U.S. foreign policy in favor of Azerbaijan and a Mexican bank. Cuellar, however, has denied all of these charges. And President Trump announcing a, quote, full and unconditional pardon of the Cuellars on Truth Social, says, quote, for years, the Biden administration weaponized the justice system against their political opponents and anyone who disagreed with them. He goes on to say that one of the clearest examples of this was when Biden, quote, used the FBI and DOJ to take out a member of his own party after Cuellar, quote, bravely spoke out against open borders and what President Trump calls the Biden border catastrophe. He says that because of those facts and others, he is hereby announcing his full and unconditional pardon of the Cuellars. President Trump attaches to that post a letter from the Cuellars' two daughters pleading for their parents' clemency, calling them individuals, honest individuals, and good, decent people. Cuellar responds by thanking President Trump for what he calls his, quote, tremendous leadership and for taking the time to look at the facts. He also thanks God and says that this pardon will allow his family to start over with a clean slate. Don.
You know, definitely interesting choice by the president, and maybe even unusual for a Republican president to pardon a sitting Democratic member of Congress. Well, Mari, what can we expect from President Trump's Oval Office announcement this afternoon?
Sure, Don. So President Trump, in just a little while, is slated to unveil what the White House is calling a historic reset of federal fuel standards and to tout $109 billion in energy savings. President Trump is expected to be joined in the Oval Office by top executives from Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. The White House says that it will be rolling back what it calls aggressive reforms that were enacted under Obama and tightened under Biden, with the administration saying that these Biden-era regulations would have increased the cost of a new car by more than $1,000 relative to these newer standards that they're ushering in today. This comes as President Trump more broadly is making a messaging push toward affordability. Here he is in his cabinet meeting yesterday. Take a look.
But the word affordability is a Democrat scam. They say it and then they go into the next subject and everyone thinks, oh, they had lower prices. No. They had the worst inflation in the history of our country.
So the president is trying to get Republicans to reclaim the messaging on affordability ahead of the 2026 midterm elections, saying that he inherited the, quote, a worst inflation ever from his predecessor. And Vice President J.D. Vance and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent are also telling Americans to hold on and be patient, to wait until 2026, as that will be the year when Americans really see the effects of the Trump administration's economic agenda. Take a look.
I think for congressional Democrats in particular, if they want to talk about affordability, they ought to look in the mirror. We are fixing what they're broken. We're proud to do it. It's the job that we were elected to do. But I think 2026 is going to be the year where this economy really takes off.
So as a result, in 2026, we are going to see very substantial tax refunds in the first quarter. So the best way to address the affordability crisis is to give Americans more money in their pockets, which is what this bill has done. We're going to see real wage increases. I think next year is going to be a fantastic year. Taxes, deregulation, energy certainty.
And President Trump, meanwhile, continues to tout deals that lower health care costs. And yesterday, the president suggested that income tax could be completely eliminated in the next couple of years due to what he calls massive tariff revenue. Don, back to you.
Okay, Mari, thank you. President Trump says he is nullifying every document. President Trump says he is nullifying every document former President Biden approved using what he calls an auto pen. He announced yesterday all auto pen signed executive actions under Biden are now void and without legal effect. Trump also said pardons, commutations, or any legal papers signed in that way are terminated. He says the move follows his earlier decision to revoke all auto pen signed executive orders from the Biden years. Trump says that Biden wasn't personally involved in approving these signatures, and aides misused the process. A congressional investigation concluded senior officials abused auto pen authority and couldn't prove Biden authorized any key actions. Former special counsel Jack Smith has been called to appear before the House Judiciary Committee. In a letter, Chairman Jim Jordan told Smith this is over the prosecution of President Trump. Smith investigated President Trump for allegedly meddling in the 2020 election. He eventually brought criminal charges against Trump. One is related to the election, another for allegedly mishandling classified documents. Both cases were dropped after Trump won re-election. The subpoena also demands all documents and communications related to Smith's time as special counsel. Smith is expected to appear on December 17th. President Trump is making an announcement now. He's going to unveil a reset of federal fuel standards that heightened under the Biden administration. It's projected to save $109 billion in total for American families. Let's hear what he has to say.
American history, the Green New Scam, and it's a quest to end the gasoline-powered car. This is what they wanted to do, even though we have more gasoline than any other country by far. And people want the gasoline car. They want everything. They want electric. They want to have lots of alternatives, but they do want the gasoline car. Right now, it's leading away by a lot. The car business is a very interesting business, but we want to keep it that way. I want to thank Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, Deputy Transportation Secretary Stephen Bradbury, as well as CEO of Ford, Jim Farley. Jim, where is Jim? Let's see. Hi, Jim. Congratulations. You're doing a great job. CEO of Stellantis, Antonio Filosa. Thank you very much, Antonio. Chairman of the National Automobile Dealers Association, Tom Castrida.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Tom. Great to have you. And Manager of General Motors Orient Plant, John Urbanek.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Great to have you guys here. And you're going to say a few words in a minute about how ridiculous this was, but we've just freed you up. So you're going to have a good day and have a good number of years. Thanks as well to Senator Shelley Moore Capito, Ted Cruz, Kevin Cramer, Marcia Blackburn, Eric Schmidt, and Bernie Marino, as well as Representative Sam Graves, Vern Buchanan, Mike Kelly, Roger Williams, Lisa McClain, and Troy Balderson. All great people. These are great people. And I know there's a lot of support long beyond the people that are here. We've had tremendous support on this. From day one, I've been taking action to make buying a car more affordable. I signed an executive order to end the unfair, expensive electric vehicle mandate, as you know, where you had to have an electric car within a very short period of time, even though there was no way of charging them and lots of other things. It would have cost $5 trillion to build the charging plants. And as you know, in certain parts of the Midwest, they spent, to build 9 chargers, they spent $8 billion. So that wasn't working out too well. That was done before me, by the way. I wouldn't have let it go forward. We're canceling the EPA's absurd tailpipe emission standards, one of the most important things that I've never had a group of people come to me more powerfully and really just devastated that they had to do it. It was killing them than the automobile manufacturers, the tailpipe emission standards. And I can tell you, your people at Ford were coming to me all the time, and they were saying, like, please, it doesn't do anything, and it's killing us. And it's driving the cost through the roof. And we revoked Biden's emissions waiver for California so that California communists could not regulate the automobile industry and ruin the entire nation of automobiles. And they were doing that, too. But we have that now under control also with your governor, who's got much more than he can control. Now, under the new rules being issued today by Secretary Duffy, the Department of Transportation will rescind the Biden fuel economy prices. And I hate to say that because they were really not economy. They were really, they were anti-economy. They were horrible what they were doing to the costs and actually making the car much worse. But these policies forced automakers to build cars using expensive technologies that drove up costs, drove up prices, and made the car much worse. The action is expected to save the typical consumer at least $1,000 off the price of a new car, and we think substantially more than that. Under the Trump administration, $70 billion are now being invested in the American auto industry. Ford has announced it will invest $5 billion across its Kentucky and Michigan plants. Is that a correct statement?
That's right.
That's a lot, $5 billion. You could do more. Creating at least 4,000 new jobs. Stellantis announced that it will invest $13 billion to expand its U.S.-based manufacturing by more than 50% and open new manufacturing facilities across the country. And I think a big part of that is also the tariffs. Because of tariffs, they're coming in. Not only the automobile industry, AI, we're leading China in AI, we're leading everybody in AI, we're leading everybody in everything. We have the hottest country right now. I will tell you, a lot of political people behind me, great political people, very successful political people. We have the hottest country anywhere in the world. 1 year ago, we had a dead country, and now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. And it started from November 5th, but it also started when we did the tariffs, and we've had tremendous support on the tariffs. It's bringing in trillions of dollars of wealth. It's bringing in national security. And I've stopped 8 wars, and of the 8 wars, 5 of them have been because of tariffs and trade. So they're very important. And General Motors plans to invest $4 billion as it brings its manufacturing back to the United States from Mexico. After falling by 5% under Biden, U.S. auto production has surged by 10% so far this year. You know, I won the auto workers vote, but now even the head of the auto workers said Trump is the greatest president we've ever seen. And he happens to be right about that. But we're protecting our auto workers, and we're making it easier for every family to afford high-quality cars. In other words, we're bringing automobiles back and the manufacturing of automobiles back into this country. We lost 52% over the years, 52% of our automobile manufacturing. You see it, closed factories all over the place. Now they're all opening up. They're being, in most cases, they're being knocked down, and new ones are being built in their place. And a big beneficiary is the state of Michigan, but South Carolina, even states that didn't really do too much with the automobiles, they're opening up plants. It's been amazing. So between automobile plants, AI plants, and plants of every other nation, really every other type, including chips, we're going to have a big percentage of the chip market very soon. Not because of the CHIPS Act, which was horrible and ridiculous, where we just gave these companies billions and billions of dollars, and they just kept the money, but because of what we did with tariffs. They have to build here, otherwise they're going to have to pay tariffs. They won't be able to do business in the United States. And we're going to have a big percentage of the chip industry. as of about a year ago, 2 years ago, we had none. And now we're going to have a very big percentage when it all finishes out. So I'd like to ask Secretary Duffy to speak, and then Mr. Farley, and then Filosa, and Urbanik, and Castrita. And also we're going to ask some of our political leaders to speak, because let me tell you, they went out of their way. This was not easy. People were brainwashed. This is a green new scam. And people were paying too much for a car that didn't work as well. And now they're going to have a great car that's going to be environmentally friendly, but it's going to cost you a lot less, and it's going to work great. All of the nonsense is being taken out of the cars. So, Secretary Duffy, could you say a few words?
Thank you, Mr. President. So yesterday at the cabinet meeting, the president was talking about affordability, and the way that Democrats talk about affordability is a lie. Today is a perfect example of that. So these CAFE standards used what was contrary to the law. The Congress set a rule that says you have to look at combustion engines. Biden and Buttigieg actually did an analysis using...
Buttigieg.
I'm sorry. Buttigieg used EVs and hybrids to come up with a 62 mile an hour per gallon standard, which I think the car companies will tell you is completely unattainable. So they spent a lot of money on technology trying to meet the unattainable standard, driving up the cost of a car, number one. And then number two, if they couldn't meet the unattainable standard, they had to trade for carbon, costing billions of dollars, and again, driving up the price of the car. So, Mr. President, what Democrats were doing were not making cars more affordable, they're making them less affordable. The consequence of that is going to be that more Americans can afford to buy a new car, which means they're going to be safer on the roads because of all the great new technology we have that save lives. So we'll have less death on American roads. These rules are going to allow the automakers to make vehicles that Americans want to purchase, not vehicles that Joe Biden and Buttigieg wants them to build, which is important. But also, this is important for American jobs. The more cars we sell, the more jobs we have in this country. And so this is jobs, this is freedom, and this is common sense, Mr. President. So thank you for your leadership. And I appreciate what the Senate did with the big, beautiful bill and what we've done here today. So thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. A big, beautiful bill is it's something. It's amazing. Wait till the people see the benefits and the lower taxes that they're going to have, lower regulations.
The Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, is stepping up its fight against drugs with the Fentanyl Free America initiative. This comes as DEA Administrator Terry Cole is touting the success of strikes on suspected drug boats. Cole told Fox News the strikes in the Caribbean are helping cut off the supply of illegal drugs into the country. He said they have seen changes to first stop loads, meaning cocaine is now more expensive when it arrives in the Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico. The DEA has also launched its Fentanyl Free America plan. The department describes this as a comprehensive enforcement initiative and public awareness campaign. It's aimed at reducing both the supply and demand for fentanyl. Vaccine advisors to the CDC are considering a major change to the childhood vaccine schedule. The change would potentially delay a dose of the hepatitis B vaccine that newborns receive, or weeks, even by years.
The vaccine advisors are a group that was handpicked by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Earlier this year, Kennedy said that giving the hepatitis B vaccine to newborns is motivated by money, not health concerns. Infectious disease experts say it's key to preventing an illness that's easy to catch and impossible to cure. They say that delaying the vaccine for even a few months will drive up infections and deaths from the disease.
A doctor who pleaded guilty to selling ketamine to Matthew Perry in the weeks before his overdose death will be sentenced today. Perry's family and others will have a chance to make a statement in Los Angeles federal court. Prosecutors are asking the judge to sentence Dr. Salvador Placina to 3 years in prison. He has entered a plea agreement where he has to admit to illegally selling the Friends star large amounts of ketamine. He was not accused of selling the active dose that investigators say killed him on October 28th. Perry had been taking the surgical anesthetic legally as a treatment for depression. When his regular doctor wouldn't provide it in the amounts he wanted, Perry turned to Placencia. He admitted to illegally selling the drug to Perry despite knowing he was a recovering addict. The pandemic-era enhanced subsidies for the Affordable Care Act are expiring soon. Lawmakers are set to vote on the subsidies. Joining us to discuss is Angie Wong, Republican strategist and political columnist, and we have Mike Leon, a host of Can We Please Talk podcast and director of strategy at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. So Mike, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the likelihood here of lawmakers arriving at a plan that will get the necessary 60 votes before the subsidies expire?
0%, Don. That's it. That's my answer. No, good to see everybody. Angie, good to see you as always. I mean, if you just look at what John Barrasso said the other day about, as he was pushing back at Democrats in the House saying they want a 3-year extension, some people want permanent resolution with that, then if we're that far off where we're blaming each other already from this, we're not going to come to some type of resolution before the Christmas break. So the subsidies will expire before we get into the 26th fiscal year. So if we're just basing it off of the words of people in Congress, I know sometimes that's a little tough to do because they say one thing and then they mean something else. I would say we're not going to reach a deal. But look, this is, Don, you and I have been talking about this for the past, couple months since we had the government shut down. I said we'd be back here because of the fight for this and the expiration of these subsidies. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to lose health care insurance. But people like me, I'll just put myself into this mix. You know, I'm a private contractor. I don't have a W-2 job. I rely on this system to be able to get health care benefits for my daughter, one who is on the spectrum and has special needs. So like, these are things that are important to somebody just like me, using myself as an example. So to see the members of Congress, in both chambers, House and Senate, battling like this, you know, in the public forum and not actually talking to each other about a resolution for this is something that's troubling to me for sure.
So Angie, like Mike said, millions of people could be impacted here. How do you feel about the situation at hand?
I actually agree with Mike. I think it's going to be 0% that this thing passes mid-December. You would need 13 senators to cross the aisle to join this. And it's a very highly unpopular bill for Republicans anyway. This is the Obamacare that nobody wants to extend, although it almost is necessary. And Donald Trump came out to say that a few days ago, to say we may actually do need to extend this because it will affect over 20 million Americans who do right now subscribe to this plan. And if they don't by December 15th renew their premiums, they jump up and it could be double what they're currently paying. So President Trump's not going to allow that to happen. But at the same time, he knows that Republicans are not very favorable of extending something that was meant to be a temporary subsidy. And there's all the points that we can go down. But ultimately, nobody wants to just put a Band-Aid over something as important as health care and insurance for all Americans. So they want more time. And I think that's what's going to happen. We may have to extend it for maybe a couple of weeks, a couple of months, just so that President Trump and his team can hash out a better plan. And I think he's already touted Trump care all over online anyway. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Okay, Mike, can you just respond to this point that Angie brought up? Aren't these subsidies, the pandemic era subsidies, supposed to be temporary? That's never meant to be permanent anyway?
Correct. Yeah, Angie's right. I mean, look, the problem with fixing healthcare is that the system is bloated, convoluted, and there's too much power with the insurance providers. Let me use myself as an example, Don. You know, when I was a W-2 employee getting healthcare insurance, and then let's say I get let go from an employer, your COBRA benefits last year, I believe, anywhere between 15 to 18 months. It's almost double, sometimes triple the price, but you get the same level of coverage. When you lose a job like that, and there are millions of people like me that are in the contract, freelance space, when they're going to the healthcare marketplace, the Obamacare, ACA stuff, a lot of the times they won't get the same coverage that they would get from a W-2 thing, right? So they rely on some of these things that we've been talking about. But again, as Angie said, these were temporary Band-Aids that were never meant to be a long-term remedy. So the Trump administration, and by the way, every administration has had this same failure. Even with Obamacare coming in, the mandates that were part of that should have never been part of that. My wife's a medical secretary and has educated me on a lot of these things that have happened given the different offices that she's worked at. Like, the issue is that the insurance providers have too much power. And a lot of people don't have that W-2 employer insurance. And then you get into the coverage of insurance. So what do we do, right? What does the Trump administration do? They're up against the wall because they're meeting a deadline where you're going to have 22 million people by the CBO's estimate that could lose insurance or could have people that have premiums that are higher in 26. But then the other part of it is the system's broken. So how do you fix the system while also giving the temporary Band-Aid and relief so people don't lose any of these ability to take advantage of these programs, and they don't lose, all of their health care all at once in one fell swoop? It's an unenviable position for any administration. Remove the person who's in 1600 Pennsylvania right now. It hasn't been tackled. It hasn't been fixed. We can go back and finger point a bunch of things, but at the end of the day, the system is bloated. And I think the Trump administration is trying to balance, how do we extend this, not have another government shutdown under my watch, and then also fix, like what Angie said, if it's Trump Care, of course, he has to add his name in there. But if it's something like that, that actually fixes the system of how we all get health insurance and get the correct coverages for what we need, then we got to see what that looks like in 26 and beyond.
Angie, I just want to build on Mike's point here. Nearly 8 in 10 Americans want to renew the tax credits, according to a Kaiser Family Foundation poll. Do you think it's worthwhile for Republicans to just extend the ACA subsidies?
Oh, well, again, I don't think we have much of a choice. We're talking less than 2 weeks before everyone has to decide what they're going to do with their health care. And if they don't, the premiums will jump up. That's always been the warning. So I think it almost is a non-negotiable at this point, where Republicans will have to come together and extend it, but just by a very, very short period of time. I can't imagine it to be more than a year, although the midterms play a big, big role in this, because quite honestly, if I were the strategist on this, I don't want to deal with this issue come the midterm. I don't want healthcare insurance to be part of that conversation. There are plenty of other things that we can talk about to win on the midterms, but healthcare is certainly not a winning issue for Republicans. Although, look, Trump is doing a great job. He's negotiating with a bunch of pharmaceutical companies and getting the favorable nation prices down for a lot of our popular drugs. I think he's going to bring Trump RX online at some point in 2026. So I'm interested in seeing what that's about. But I agree with Mike. We need to stop just funneling money into these healthcare insurance companies to then tell us what we can do with our own medical plans. If we could cut out the middleman, I think a lot of Americans would be very, very happy to take on their own responsibility and create their own health plan with the money that is provided by the government to do so.
Mike, should we put the subsidies directly into the pockets of consumers, which would allow patients to decide what to buy, and it creates market competition?
Yeah. I mean, the simple answer, Don, is yes. I do agree with Angie's overall point. And again, I can't stress this enough, because I think a lot of the times when people watch these panels, they don't hear, they hear people give anecdotal evidence, right? As opposed to what's actually happening in my life. Because I'm going through this, Don, like right now, right? Like I went through the process of a W-2 employer's insurance and what that's being taken out pre-tax of your check, to now a contract employee and actually having to go through the Obamacare website and seeing what Fidelis covers that Cigna actually covers. Fidelis doesn't cover it. So when you switch your healthcare provider, unfortunately, to quote Barack Obama, you don't get to keep your doctor, like he said back in the day, because your doctor's not going to take that certain level of coverage. So to Angie's point, we do need to give people the option to be able to take the healthcare plan that they want and that they need for their families, given their needs of whether it be the children or whether it be the parents, and give them money in their pockets that they can be able to use for that. Now, I know companies obviously set up HSAs and all of this type of money that you can put aside to be able to, almost save for a rainy day in case you need a procedure, things like that. And there's more coverage afforded to these insurance providers. But again, the biggest thing in all of this that I always come back to is, and it's funny to me that the Trump admin hasn't been more front-facing on this, specifically because they brought in DOGE to cut everything that's bloated in government spending. Well, why wouldn't we look at insurance providers, and especially at this industry? Because this industry, I mean, we see a high-profile murder of one of the CEOs of this industry on trial right now with Luigi Mangione. That was front and center of talking about the healthcare debate in this country. why did that murder happen, right? We can get into the underlying layers that are going to be discovered in the trial, but the actual issue is about the way people get healthcare insurance in this country. And there's millions of people that don't have it. There's millions of people that are underinsured. I'm not even talking about those folks right now. The system is bloated, and I would like for there to be a fix. And the fix, I think, will come, like Angie said, you don't want to talk about this too much at the midterms, but the fix will come by putting money back in Americans' pocket and giving them the control to be able to go out there and get their insurance and have the freedom to exercise what it is that they want to do with their healthcare plan needs.
Angie, could Trump Care be a win for patients and consumers?
I think so. Look, the guy's pretty busy right now, right? He's taking care of a lot of world wars and solving lots of problems everywhere. I know he's going to get to this. Mike, I'm just so happy that we can have this dialogue here on TV, because that's what's going to be happening on the Senate floor in a couple of days. And I'm glad that these issues are coming arise because it affects all Americans. We're looking at least 45 million Americans that somehow are part of these plans that are currently they're currently enrolled in these ACA plans. So, this is not something that you can not talk about because it's a huge portion of Americans, and there should be a solution. Look, we've solved a lot of things. We're able to take very difficult situations and find solutions for them. I think this one we can solve. I think because the Trump administration is working with the pharmaceuticals, is working with doctors, and should be working, as Mike said, with the health insurance companies. I think we can solve this. And remember, we're with the art of the deal president. He would love to solve this problem domestically.
Mike, I want to know where you stand on Trump Care.
Well, I'll piggyback on something Angie just said there. First off, Angie, good to see you. We could have just done this together in person since we're both down here in Florida. But what's funny to me is that you said Trump Care. Why did you say Trump Care, Don? Because he loves putting things, his name in front of it and saying, I can solve it. I will do it. So it would be a huge win for him to be able to tout that he solved this issue. And he's, by the way, in his first administration, he told Republicans, if you recall, he was saying all the time adamantly, this is something we need to solve. He never liked Obamacare. He always wanted to repeal and replace it, but they never had a plan for it. We're here now 6, 7, 8 years later. We still don't have a plan for it, but he does know the importance of it. It's a losing issue, to what Angie said earlier, for Republicans, because now we've had two different Trump administrations sandwiched in between a Biden one, and we haven't truly solved the healthcare crisis, which is what we've been talking about across this panel. So I think he understands the importance of it. The naming convention, forget about that just for a second. I think he understands that there could be a huge victory at the beginning of 26 whether we extend the subsidies or we figure out some type of intermediate 90, 120-day rollout plan for Americans with respect to healthcare so that you don't lose the health insurance. It's something that people that are going to be in some of these purple districts in the House and Senate, they can take with them on the road and say, look, we did do this for you guys. We are championing that. We are the party of healthcare. Democrats shut down over healthcare. We actually went out there and solved it. I can't believe I'm giving the Republicans a strategy in the playbook, but they could do that. And I think Trump understands that. I know Angie knows that Trump understands that. And this is something that I'm sure it's top of mind for the president. It's top of mind for John Thune. It's top of mind for Speaker Johnson, and giving that information to the president that this is a losing issue if we don't do something about this.
Angie, your final comments here. What's at the core of the problems? High premiums, not a lot of choice, poor outcomes for patients' health. What's at the core of the issue?
The core of the issue for Obamacare is that it was never perfect. It never got fixed. And it was never affordable, like the name says, affordable health care. It is not at all, because if the government has to continually subsidize it and write blank checks to it, well, it's not a winning formula. A lot of this comes from the fact that there's not a competitive marketplace, like you brought up. The government restrictions make it impossible for all healthcare insurers to jump in. If we loosen that, or maybe do separate plans, I'm not sure what the actual answer is, because we would have to do such a deep dive into it. But you have to make the marketplace a lot more competitive state by state, so that other insurers can come in and be part of this, or just get rid of all the health care insurance altogether and do single pay do a single pay plan for all Americans. So these are the hard things that has to be discussed on the Senate floor, the House floor, and also in the Oval Office. But, these things change. We're modernizing every single day. Technology, medicine, everything is moving so fast. We look outside the U.S., we see models that we can replicate. I think you almost have to give it that allotted time to go through and see what's going to be best for us. And I would love to have Elon Musk and other technologists as part of this conversation, because they'll be able to see forward. We're stuck in this really old place where healthcare insurance and, submitting paperwork and all this stuff, maybe all that can go away with the right minds involved in this conversation.
Well, all right, Mike, Angie, thank you for having this conversation with us. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Good.
Republican Matt Van Epps has won Tennessee's special election in the 7th Congressional District. The former state commissioner and Army helicopter pilot defeated Democrat Afton Ben with just over 53% of the vote, according to the Associated Press. Ben finished with roughly 46%. Van Epps said his victory sent a loud and clear message that the people of Tennessee stand with President Trump. Here's more.
Our victory was powered by supporters of President Trump turning out to vote. The president built the largest, most diverse coalition to ever elect a Republican, and we leaned in on that. President Trump was all in with us, and it made the difference. In Congress, I'll be all in with him. Thank you. Thank you.
President Trump reacted on Truth Social, congratulating Epps, saying, quote, "The radical left Democrats threw everything at him, including millions of dollars." On Monday, Van Epps headlined a rally which featured House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senator Marsha Blackburn. Trump also called into a Monday rally. On the Democrat side, former Vice President Al Gore and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stumped for Ben. Millions of dollars were poured into both campaigns. Van Epps will represent 14 counties in Middle Tennessee, filling the seat vacated by Congressman Mark Green. The win helps Republicans maintain their narrow House majority leading into 2026. Ben conceded last night, crediting volunteers for keeping the race close.
Democratic activist Mayra Macias launched an independent campaign for the U.S. House today. She is vying for the Chicago area seat of retiring Congressman Chuy Garcia. Here's more.
Macias worked as a field organizer for former President Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. She also led a nonprofit that backed former President Biden's policy agenda. Chuy Garcia faced criticism from some in his party last month for announcing his retirement after the state's candidate filing deadline. That ensured his handpicked successor, his chief of staff, Patty Garcia, would run unopposed for the party's nomination. Patty Garcia will be the Democratic Party's nominee and is not related to him. Chuy Garcia has said concerns about his and his wife's health and the adoption of their grandson prompted the last-minute reversal. And in more political news, James Solomon has been elected mayor of Jersey City, defeating former New Jersey Governor Jim McGreevey in a runoff. Solomon, a city council member since 2017, ran on a platform to make the city more affordable. He promised to tackle rising housing costs, invest in public safety, and improve schools. Solomon emphasized standing up to developers, special interests, and even President Trump. The Trump administration is suing to end Jersey City's sanctuary city protections. Solomon plans to hire 100 new police officers and create a civilian complaint review board for oversight. McGreevey was running for office for the first time since resigning as governor in 2004.
The Justice Department sued 6 more states yesterday for refusing to respond to a request for statewide voter registration rules. That brings the number of states sued to at least 14. NTD's Arlene Richards has more details.
The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division announced on Tuesday that lawsuits had been filed against 6 more states for failure to disclose voter registration rolls. The states this time include Delaware, Maryland, New Mexico, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington. In the lawsuit, the department accuses the states of failing to maintain accurate voter rolls and make those records available for inspection. Attorney General Pam Bondi said in a statement that the states had fallen into a pattern of noncompliance and that the law requires them to comply with basic voter roll maintenance. This latest action brings the total to at least 14 states the department has sued in an effort to obtain voter information. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon of the department's Civil Rights Division said our federal elections laws ensure every American citizen may vote freely and fairly. Representatives from the 6 states have not officially commented on the lawsuit. In September, Washington Secretary of State Steve Hobbs responded to a letter from the DOJ requesting the voter registration list. He said, while we will provide the DOJ with the voter registration data that state law already makes public, we will not compromise the privacy of Washington voters. The DOJ sued Maine and Oregon in September over voter registration rolls. At that time, Maine's Secretary of State Shenna Bellows said she didn't trust what the Trump administration would do with the personal voter information. In the announcement of the latest lawsuits, Attorney General Pam Bondi said accurate voter rolls are the cornerstone of fair and free elections. She said the department will continue filing election integrity litigation until states comply. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The Trump administration is pausing immigration applications for individuals from 19 countries. That's according to a policy memo from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services.
The White House hit pause on all immigration applications for people from Somalia and 18 other non-European countries, citing national security and public safety concerns. The official memorandum outlining the new policy points to recent crimes suspected to be committed by immigrants, including the deadly attack on U.S. National Guard members in Washington last week. An Afghan man was arrested as a suspect, and Afghanistan is also on the list. Trump promised a flurry of restrictions after the National Guard attack.
It was a crime against our entire nation.
Most of the countries targeted were slapped with severe immigration restrictions in June, including Afghanistan, Chad, the Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Myanmar, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, while Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela were subjected to partial restrictions. The new policy places a hold on pending applications, including green card and U.S. citizenship processing. It also orders all immigrants from the list of countries to be re-reviewed, which involves, quote, a potential interview and, if necessary, a re-interview to fully assess all national security and public safety threats.
The Homeland Security Committee is holding a hearing today amid a rise in violence against law enforcement. Committee Chairman Andrew Garbarino had more to say in this opening statement.
Public trust and public safety go hand in hand, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about how they believe agencies can strike an appropriate balance between officer safety and law enforcement accountability. Our witnesses today have seen the consequences of this rising harassment and violence firsthand. I hope their testimony reminds my colleagues and the American people that those who wear the badge are human beings whose dedication to safeguarding our country should never make them targets.
Today's hearing follows several violent incidents involving law enforcement. On July 7th, an individual armed with a rifle and tactical gear attacked a Border Patrol facility in McAllen, Texas. That attack injured multiple officers. In September, a shooter opened fire on an ICE facility in Dallas, killing 2 detainees and injuring 2 others. The FBI is investigating the act as an act of targeted violence against law enforcement. In October, DHS discovered gangs in Mexico have placed bounties on ICE officers and Border Patrol agents. Federal authorities launched a new immigration enforcement operation today in New Orleans. Tricia McLaughlin, DHS Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs, previewed the operation during an interview with CNN this morning.
Catalina Crunch, which we are launching today down in New Orleans, we're first and foremost really focusing on those worst of the worst criminals, those criminals who have previously been locked up by local authorities, but then because New Orleans functions as a sanctuary city, those individuals were not released to ICE. They were instead released back onto New Orleans streets. So we're talking about child pedophiles who are on our list of targets, burglars, gang members, rapists. Those individuals we are highly targeting, and we will continue whether it be 5,000 arrests or beyond.
DHS says the targets include illegal immigrants released after arrest. Their crimes include home invasion, armed robbery, grand theft auto, and rape. The full scope of the operation hasn't been detailed. Officials previously expected to run through the end of the year, with a brief slowdown around Christmas. President Trump said yesterday the National Guard will be deployed to the city in the coming weeks. The Democratic-run city is the latest location added to the administration's stepped-up enforcement efforts. It follows recent actions in Charlotte, North Carolina. 2025 has seen a dramatic increase in violence against law enforcement across the country. Lawmakers examined the role that anti-law enforcement rhetoric plays on the increase in violence. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has more on this story.
Today's hearing is not about silencing dissent or restricting free speech. It is about responsibility and recognizing that rhetoric has consequences and ensuring that officers can perform their duties without fear.
In 2024, the FBI reported more than 85,000 assaults on law enforcement officers, the highest number in over a decade. And in 2025 alone, Immigration and Customs Enforcement registered an increase of 1,100% of assaults against its officers.
Federal officers remain unwavering in their oath to the Constitution and their duty to enforce the laws Congress enacts, regardless of the political environment. What has changed is the environment in which they serve. It has grown increasingly hostile with rising violence, threats, and online harassment directed at officers.
Experts in today's hearing singled out polarizing rhetoric against the duties of law enforcement as the main cause for increase in assaults against law enforcement officers.
The rhetoric coming from the top, calling officers Nazis and Gestapo, it better stop right now. You are inflaming dangerous circumstances. A job that is to enforce the laws of this country, the laws that have been passed by those that have been elected by the people of this country.
According to the FBI, 1/3 of cop killers self-identifies with the narratives that portrays law enforcement as the villain.
That narrative, used for political gain, is amplified across social media platforms and other means, and it all too often goes unchallenged. And it's not harmless rhetoric, it is fuel. We have seen this fuel ignite in cities and towns, large and small, all across America.
Democratic lawmakers did not invite an expert for today's hearing, but a private citizen who launched attacks on the Trump administration.
The fact of the matter is that right now, in the United States of America, there is a semi-secret police force abducting people based on the color of their skin and sending many of them via state-sponsored human trafficking to extraterritorial concentration camps.
Today's hearing comes 1 week after 2 National Guardsmen were shot in Washington, D.C. One of them, Army Specialist Sarah Beckstrom, died from her wounds, and the other remains in serious conditions. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
President Trump tells Americans his tariffs will save them massive tax dollars next year, doubling down on his proposal to give out dividend checks. Listen to what he had to say.
They told me that next year is projected to be the largest tax refund season ever, and we're going to be giving back refunds out of the tariffs because we've taken in literally trillions of dollars, and we're going to be giving a nice dividend to the people in addition to reducing debt.
The president also spoke about lowering taxes to the point that many could pay very little for income tax or eventually having no income tax at all due to how much money the country is making from his tariff policies. Any changes to the tax code will need approval from Congress. NTD spoke to several Republican lawmakers to get a sense for how they feel about the dividend checks. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports.
If the president wants to realize this goal of sending $2,000 dividend checks to American families, Congress will need to sign off on it. But it appears right now that most Republicans are undecided as to whether or not they would support this. One Republican Senator, Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, said that any revenue that is gained from tariffs should be used to pay down the national debt. Yesterday, I asked several lawmakers on the House side how they feel about such an idea. Many of them told me they need to wait and see how the numbers add up. What are your thoughts on President Trump's idea to give $2,000 dividend checks to people from the tariff revenues that he's raking in right now?
Well, I think people would welcome that, and I think that people need to understand that the tariffs are a tool in the tool chest the president is using to negotiate trade deals. That's the most significant thing, because he has negotiated a number of great trade deals
I'm not sure. We have to really look at that. That has to be something that we have to really think through.
It's something I need to learn more about. First time in a decade, we actually have more money than we're spending out because President Trump's decisions are slowly but surely turning the tide. Now, we got a long ways to go, but I think he's a great president. He's making a lot of progress.
Now, House Speaker Mike Johnson previously said he thinks this is a good idea, but he also says he needs to wait and see how the math looks next year.
He's thinking about something maybe midway into next year when the tariff revenue is realized and we can figure out what that looks like.
Considering Republicans' slim majority in Congress, there will need to be significant, if not entire, Republican support for this in order for it to get through Congress if all Democrats are opposing it. But I think what could help Trump get Republicans on board with this is if they see the tariffs consistently raking in a substantial amount of revenue, and of course the pressure could continue to grow if Trump keeps tightening up on this request. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
President Trump suggested that Americans may not have income tax to pay in the future. Joining us to discuss is Joseph Trevisani, economic and currency analyst at FX Street. Joseph, always great to see you. Good afternoon. So what is your view on the likelihood and feasibility of tariff revenue completely replacing income tax? Because calculations...
Hi, Don. Good to see you. Is tariff revenue going to replace the income tax? I can say that quite unequivocally, no, it will not. There really isn't any chance. The government needs and depends on income tax. And the idea that a tariff can, without damaging the economy, make it at high enough levels without damaging the economy, it just doesn't seem realistic. Is this a political statement? Yes, I would imagine so.
So you talked about raising tariffs to the point that is enough for income tax replacement while not damaging the economy. Can you talk a bit more about that? Because according to calculations by Axios, the money that is required, the revenue required, is $2.5 trillion a year to offset income tax. What would be the impact of that on trade and the economy?
Well, it would be disastrous. I don't think there's any realistic point that will happen. I mean, even if you just talk about even if you take the extreme point of view and say every industry that manufactures here will be totally autarkic, meaning just here in the United States, it still requires all sorts of raw materials, of partially finished products from overseas. I don't really see any reality to that. Now, are we talking about economic reality or political reality? As far as a political reality goes, I can see why a political party or a president or a leader might want to posit this as a goal to reach for. But as far as a realistic economic policy, I don't see it being very realistic.
So another side of this is, do you think tariffs are a sustainable revenue source for a country in general?
Yes, that's true. And they are a sustainable revenue source if they stay in place. Meaning, for many, many years after the Second World War, there were very few tariffs in the United States for incoming goods. So now that has changed. Could it change again? Of course it can. So the idea that you're going to have a steady stream into the future from a revenue source, meaning tariffs, that will remain unchanged, since Trump himself and his administration has used tariffs largely as a negotiating point to get other countries to change their tariff regimes, their import quotas, things like that. So if it is already in its current position being used as a negotiating tool, it's tough to believe that will change in the future.
So you talk about tariffs being a negotiation tool. Can you elaborate on that? What is the fundamental purpose of tariffs? And can I ask you, if a government uses tariffs as the primary source of revenue for its spending, is that considered misusing tariffs or not?
Well, it depends on your judgment, I guess. If you are saying, to deal with the second question first, is replacing the income tax, meaning that Americans don't have to pay income tax, with an external source that is charged to foreigners, is that or potentially charged to foreigners, is that a misuse of tariffs? Well, I guess that depends on your point of view. I would say no, it's not necessarily a misuse of tariffs, After all, how the government generates revenue is open to all sorts of considerations, interpretations, and judgments, and that's not going to change. The reason I think that the administration, and this I agree with them on it, used tariffs as a negotiating tool was because before the Trump administration, at least this Trump administration, the tariff regime around the world with the United States was largely based on conditions that have long since disappeared. For the Europeans, they were based in rebuilding their economy after the Second World War. They were permitted to charge tariffs so they could rebuild their industrial base. For China, on the lead up into its membership into the World Trade Organization, and after that, it was granted tariffs so that it could develop its economy. Neither of these conditions in those two circumstances are still true. Europe does not need to develop its economy, and at least it doesn't need to develop it from the post-World War II disaster. And China is no longer a developing country. It is a fully fledged economic powerhouse with the second largest economy in the world. So the tariff regime that permitted these countries to charge the US tariffs when we did not charge their goods are no longer true. And that is the reason that Trump used tariffs on incoming goods to change that pattern.
All right, understood. Joseph, another topic I wanted to talk to you about today. Your thoughts on these Trump accounts where newborns will get a $1,000 deposit. How much money could this initial $1,000 turn into after 18 years?
After 18 years, you're going to probably, I don't know, depending on what the economy goes, you'll be at, I don't know, $10,000. That's a guess if it's 18 years. I do know that with the run of the stock market over the past 15 years, I can just speak from my own experience that my daughter's 529 accounts here in New York State have tripled in value in about 12 years. So there is a real potential for this. But again, remember, it's based on equities primarily because that's where your money is. Is this a good idea? Of course it's a good idea. How could it be a bad idea? But its value, I think, for the moment is, of course, political. But we are heading into an election year.
So do you think it's likely that parents will have to put additional contributions into the account to see a more meaningful amount of money?
Yes, the more money you put into an account like that, of course, the better it performs. Whether the terms of these accounts will require parents to put in a certain amount of money or have the government match it, I don't really know. I don't know that the details are out on them. But just in general, an investment account is a good idea. There isn't really anything negative about it. And if the government is providing $1,000, that's $1,000 that some people won't have to provide.
Well, all right. That's it, Joseph, for today. Thank you for coming on, and always great to speak with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me, Don. Always good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Europe has decided to phase out Russian gas imports by 2027. The European Council today announced the agreement with the European Parliament, calling it a new era.
Today is indeed a historic day for our union. Last night, we reached a provisional agreement on the Commission's proposal to fully phase out Russian fossil fuels. We're turning that page, and we're turning it for good. This is the dawn of a new era, the era of Europe's full energy independence from Russia.
The agreement will include a legally binding stepwise prohibition on liquefied natural gas and pipeline gas imports from Russia. A full ban will take effect by the end of 2026 and autumn 2027, respectively. As of October, Russia accounted for 12% of EU gas imports, down from 45% before its 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Hungary, France, and Belgium are among the countries still receiving Russian gas.
NATO foreign ministers are gathering in Brussels today for a one-day meeting. They're discussing the U.S. peace proposal to end the war in Ukraine and the alliance's support for the country. NATO chief Mark Rutte criticizes Russia for continuing the fighting while also provoking NATO.
Russia is also demonstrating increasingly reckless behavior when it comes to NATO, such as violating our airspace, conducting cyber attacks, and deploying spy ships to map allies' undersea infrastructure. These incidents underscore the need for unwavering vigilance.
Rutte says it's crucial that Western allies and partners increase the pressure on Russia amid the ongoing fighting. He adds that 2/3 of NATO member states have committed to support Ukraine with weapons through the so-called prioritized Ukraine requirements list. In total, the program received commitments worth $4 billion. This includes contributions from Australia and New Zealand, which aren't members of NATO. A day after a meeting in Moscow, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. is making progress in parts of the peace process to end the war in Ukraine. Also, the Kremlin responds to questions on whether Russian President Putin rejected a U.S. peace proposal. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pastar has the latest.
What we have tried to do, and I think have made some progress, is figure out what can the Ukrainians live with that gives them security guarantees for the future. They're never going to be invaded again.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio telling Fox News that security guarantees are a major part of the ongoing peace process, not just to prevent another invasion, but to make sure Ukraine can also rebuild its economy once the fighting stops. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner met with Russian President Putin in Moscow on Tuesday, but the meeting ultimately produced no direct results. The Kremlin describes the talks as constructive, while adding that compromises had not yet been found. But Russia denies reports saying that Putin rejected a 28-point peace plan put forward by the U.S.
No, it's not correct. Some things were accepted, others were marked as unacceptable. This is a normal working process, a search for compromise.
And Ukraine confirms that the U.S. delegation entered in contact after the Moscow meeting. But Kiev wasn't briefed on the details during that conversation.
Since this was a telephone contact for security reasons, it is difficult to imagine that the details of the Moscow meeting were discussed.
But the spokesman added that the American side said the Putin meeting helped steer the process in the right direction. And NATO wants to increase pressure on Russia. 2/3 of NATO member states have committed to support Ukraine with weapons through the so-called Prioritized Ukraine Requirement List, or PEARL in short. In total, the program received commitments worth $4 billion. This includes contributions from Australia and New Zealand, which are not members of NATO. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Taiwan is thankful and China is upset today after a move by President Trump. Trump signed into law new rules requiring the State Departments to regularly review and update guidelines and interactions with Taipei. It means the State Department should carry out reviews of contacts with Taiwan at least once every 5 years. Taiwan says the law stands as a firm symbol of the two countries' shared values of democracy, freedom, and respect for human rights. China says it opposes any form of official contact between the U.S. and, quote, the Taiwan region of China. The Trump administration continues to limit U.S. visas for certain foreign nationals. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced today that there will be consequences for those who persecute people of faith. In a post on X, he said, quote, the State Department will restrict U.S. visas for those who knowingly direct, authorize, fund, to support, or carry out violations of religious freedom. This visa policy applies to Nigeria and other governments or individuals that persecute people for their religious beliefs. Rubio said this policy is in response to atrocities and violence against Christians in Nigeria. So far, it's unclear what other governments or individuals are targeted. A major winter storm is hitting the Northeast, bringing heavy snow, ice, and dangerous travel conditions. More than 50 million people are under winter weather alerts tonight. Snowfall totals could reach up to a foot in parts of the Ohio Valley, Pennsylvania, New York, and New England. The storm marks the region's first major blast of winter as snow, wind, and ice spread across the east. In West Virginia yesterday, vehicles struggled to stay on the road as slick conditions caused traffic problems. Forecasters warn more perilous conditions are on the way as colder air pushes into the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. The FBI is warning the public about possible charity fraud this holiday season. The Bureau says Americans looking to donate should be cautious. Here's more.
Officials urge the public to be alert to schemes that solicit donations. Scams tend to increase during national disasters, major emergencies, or whenever people are actively looking for ways to help the community. The FBI recommends that individuals only give to established charities or groups whose work they are familiar with and trust. Officials urge Americans who do donate to use a check or credit card. The FBI warns that if an organization asks for a donation using cash, gift card, virtual currency, or wire transfer, it's probably a scam. Any group can be researched through the Federal Trade Commission.
The trash panda is living up to its name. Just listen to this story out of Virginia. Officers were called to a liquor store in Hanover County after the place was found ransacked. Liquor bottles strewn about and the masked suspect passed out on the bathroom floor. And that suspect is a very drunk raccoon. Just look at him laying on the ground there. An officer was able to get him to an animal shelter where he was checked out for injuries and given a chance to sleep off his libatons. He was then released back into the wild. That raccoon had too much to drink.